Hello everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the DM supplement, The Incredible World of Doors and Locks, designed by Martín Davico for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. The locked door is a staple in D&D and pretty much every RPG. It's also not a super satisfying part of D&D 5e. You know, a lot of video games satisfy that by including a mini game of some kind. Like it could be, you know, you need a certain threshold or a skill check, but you also need to do some kind of mini game. And I'm thinking specifically of like Skyrim, for example, where you have to actually like do the tumbler thing, and you've got like the two, I think it was like a double joystick thing, and you had to move the lock and the other piece, and you know, things would shake and all that, just to make it a little bit more interesting. And you had finite lockpicks as well. That was a finite item that you had to keep track of, and they would break if you failed. That was a fine system. D&D 5e doesn't have anything like that. It basically just says if you've got a set of I guess it's just lockpicks, and you're proficient in them, then you can pick locks and you make the check, and if you fail, you just keep trying until you succeed. It's not very satisfying. So what I was really looking forward with this supplement was a way to make that more satisfying, to expand upon those rules and make it more enjoyable and rewarding for the player to pick locks, as well as interesting and maybe more dangerous. You know, include different elements of maybe even like skill challenges, or give me some traps and puzzles and all that. This is only a 9-page supplement, and it does provide some interesting information that I think is helpful, but doesn't quite go nearly far enough in what I was really hoping to get from a supplement that was specifically focusing on doors and lockpicking, which I'm a big, you know, let's do it. Give me a supplement that's just totally focused on this part of the game, because I do absolutely think it's a part of the game that needs to be expanded on. This is, as I mentioned, something that I think is mostly fairly unsatisfying. Like pretty much the only thing you can do is if you fail a lock, maybe you could trigger a trap, but even then, like noticing a trap and triggering is probably a different thing. So how do we handle making lockpicking more rewarding and more interesting, than other than the fact that you can just keep retrying? Well, narratively, you can have time pass, which is always a tricky thing for DMs to handle. But if somebody fails a lock, okay, time passed, and now a possible repercussion is that, you know, if you're in a, you know, urban environment, you're trying to break into somebody's house, then maybe somebody notices you, or the owner comes home or something. Or if you're in the middle of a dungeon trying to pick a lock, maybe some patrolling monsters come by and attack you, or you know, something. That is something that you can do, which is something that this supplement does mention. The fact that time could absolutely be a factor, and it even includes some exciting threats that could occur that maybe why you need to get into this locked door all of a sudden. It gets a little bit kind of like action movie-esque with some of these threats, however, which I don't think you would normally combine with a locked door, but it's an interesting concept. But in this case, it's like the whole structure is coming down around you, or there's like the room you're in is like filling with a poisonous gas, or you know, lava or acid or something, or there's an explosion that's about to go off. I mean, it's all very like action movie shit. But that's a very specific situation you're putting your players into. It's almost like a Tomb of Horrors or Tomb of the Nine Gods situation, where it's like a death trap dungeon that they're falling into, and they have to pick their way out of a lock. So that can be useful for those very specific situations, but in the most part, I don't think that's really gonna happen all that often, where you're in this like dire, super exciting situation. Instead, I think more often than not, you're gonna end up just, yeah, you come across a locked door. You know, it's a closet in a dungeon, and the boss has a key, but maybe you want to break in and get the loot first. You know, so there's not really like a threat right there, and the only one you can do is like, well, if you fail enough times, then maybe I'll spawn a monster, you know, patrol that comes by, or something along those lines. In this case, we can use the repercussion table, which the one good rule that this supplement does add is the concept of a safe difficulty class and a problematic difficulty class, DC. Problematic DC or safe DC. What that means is it turns lockpicking into 2 different thresholds. The safe DC means you have successfully picked the lock and nothing bad happens. The problematic DC means that you successfully pick the lock, but something bad happens, which I think is a cool concept. In other words, it's failing forward. Now, if you fail the problematic DC, that means you still don't pick the lock, so there's a chance you can straight up fail completely. But that is interesting that you could succeed just enough, but yet you still end up with a problem. Now, I think that's a cool idea. I like the idea of failing forward. From what I can tell from this table that it gives, the problematic DC is only 3 away from the safe DC, so it actually seems like it'd be pretty rare to hit one and not the other. And the repercussion table is not as satisfying as I was hoping for. It's a D10 table that lists things like a trap is triggered. Well, okay, but this is the Incredible World of Doors and Locks supplement. Give me those traps. Like, that's what I want. I want you to have tables and information about specifically door traps that I have to deal with. Or maybe what would be really interesting is if you want to go on the action movie thing, maybe the first time you fail a lock, suddenly that starts triggering a trap. And now you've got like 1 or 2 more successes until that trap triggers, and maybe it's going to be and maybe you have like disadvantage now because something's happening, something's closing like permanently or something that you've done. I'm picturing the literally like the Star Wars like garbage chute moment where they're trying to like break in and you see like the walls and all that shit. Like that all gets really interesting. So I was hoping for something more interesting than just a trap is triggered, or the second one is alarm is triggered. Well, give me some different kind of alarms. Like, what does that mean necessarily? A few of them are kind of obvious that you could use, like you make a loud noise, which draws attention to either people if you're in a city, or if you're in the middle of a dungeon, then a bunch of monsters. Hopefully, not picking the lock in a forest with nothing around you or anything. That kind of again runs into the problem of like there's no real threat and you can just let them open the door eventually. Then why are you getting a check? That's a whole other concept, I guess. But I have a problem with some of them that are more narrative based. Like, for example, there's a dog napping on the other side of the door. Well, that doesn't make sense if you're picking the lock into a closet in a dungeon. Or maybe it is and you just want to spawn a dog there, and that creates an interesting dilemma. I really don't like the one that there's a scared child on the other side. That is something that I would script into the adventure specifically and then write a whole bunch of information about it and create this interesting challenge for the players to deal with. That is not something I'm going to leave up to a fucking table that happens as a repercussion of not quite being able to successfully pick a lock. So I don't like seeing the more weird narrative ones there. I want to see, if there's repercussions, then just say, okay, there's, a patrol could come by, or these kind of traps can trigger, or something more mechanical based. The supplement, to its credit, the designer does mention the fact that this is not a rules heavy supplement. It is more narrative based. So I accept that, but that is going to be part of my criticism, is I wanted some more rules because I think it's lacking in rules. If we had more concrete rules and the only problem was, I wish we had better ways of narratively weaving in this system into the game system, then that would be a fine way to do a supplement. But I think the rules are actually really lacking when it comes to picking locks and making that whole system more rewarding and interesting. And thus, when I see a supplement that specifically says I don't want to do a bunch of rules about it, then I do find that disappointing, because and I'm not looking for big crunchy systems about like this whole, we're just going to have to bog down every single locked door is going to be this whole big system. We don't necessarily have to do that. Although I think it would be interesting to have those options, give me a bunch of different options about how to do it, maybe, and do it door by door. Like, one door, like I said, can be, something dangerous happens that you have to then pick your way out of, or one door could be a skill challenge where it's a really tricky, multi-step, like a vault door system that takes like multiple people working, and one person has to like hold something back with their athletics check, and somebody else has to, use their investigation to figure out where exactly they have to do this. The person uses sleight of hand to do that. You could turn into like a multi-party thing for big doors. That's kind of the thing I was really hoping to get, which this supplement unfortunately isn't really interested in doing. The one good thing we do get, besides I do like the problematic DCs and the safeties. I think that's an interesting concept, that you can basically succeed, but still, or you can succeed in opening the door, but then you still end up with a failure of sorts, is that we do get some sample doors, which is absolutely what I was wanting to get. In this case, a few hidden doors, which all involve investigation checks to try to even locate them and figure out what you have to do to open them. I think, because it just mentions the fact that they require investigation checks to be found, and then you have to do a thing to open them, but then they list DC. So I'm assuming that's the investigation check DC. It doesn't actually mention that anywhere versus like a lock-picking DC, because you're not picking a lock for a hidden door. So I think it needs to be better spelled out in the rules somewhere. Magic doors, again, what are we using for our DC? There's an Arcana check. Is it still lock-picking at that point? Even though they all mention the fact that they only open if certain special things happen, like if you smear blood on the door, or it gets hit by moonlight, or I really like the one that somebody has to die in front of the door, in which case it does mention that certain spells will get around this, by the way. So like Moonlight, you can use the Moonbeam spell. For Door of Death, you can use Feign Death as a spell to kind of trick the door. I thought those were really cool ideas, but again, I don't know what actual skills we're using to use the problematic DC and safe DC column that's listed. And then a few puzzle doors, which are riddles, and you have to just answer with that riddle. I don't know if you're, there's no keypad we're typing in. I don't know if you're just saying it out loud or how that works, but I do appreciate that we got these. I would have loved to have even more, but this is partly what I wanted, was give me some content that I can use. Don't just tell me like how doors, a big part of the first whole page is just like the philosophical nature of doors. Like, what is a door? It keeps some people in and keeps some people out. Like, okay, that's great. I don't really need any of that information. I just want content on doors. Give me some sample door ideas. Give me some with traps. Give me some with specific traps, specific alarm systems. Ones where you have to make that investigation check to figure out first, and then you have to find it. And again, the table does do some of that, so that's all very nice, but it's not quite enough of what I was looking. And for example, another thing that the supplement does narratively is what the door says about its owner, which is certain kinds of doors could reflect upon that owner inside. That's something I would never have thought of when I'm building my world or dungeon, is do I give a shit what the doors look like? Which is an interesting, thing to think about. If, the doors are scary, then they want to keep people out, and maybe the owner is intimidating or something. I would never have thought twice about this, honestly. It's not bad. It's not a bad thing that this is included here, and there's a lot of options. But it's not necessarily the content that I was looking for when it comes to, again, expanding on what I think is certainly a kind of a gaping hole in D&D 5e, which is the entire lockpick system. For another example, give me some sample lockpicks, like maybe some magic lockpicks that have, do different things and can use advantage on stuff, and give me a system where your lockpicks can break, or like Skyrim, like the breaking lockpicks and the finite amount of lockpicks you have to deal with. Come up with a system of several optional rules I can choose from to make lockpicking a more interesting system, and then I, as the DM, can then pick and choose based on how fiddly I want that system to be versus not fiddly at all, and I'll just never use, locked doors, or use it like some video games and just be like, no, you have to have the key. There is no lockpicking skill. Just give me all those kind of options, which we do get. There's one whole page dedicated to hidden keys, which again is very narrative based, because it's all about, okay, the key is hidden in a different location. You just have to turn into like a point and click adventure game at that point, like a search, or someone else just has the key, which only works for like maybe an urban environment or something where you're going to look for. It's too much narrative stuff and not necessarily enough rule stuff, which I understand was the intent of the designer, but as the person reviewing this product, I was disappointed in that overall intent. Let's go over my pros and cons for the incredible world of doors and locks. Pros: problematic DC on top of safe DC is an excellent method of failing forward, which means you succeed, but something bad happens. I like that system a lot. I would have even made it so in a lot of cases, and I would have changed this to have another rule where, okay, only your first roll matters. Like, you don't get to fucking keep retrying it. Your first roll matters. You're locked into that first roll. And then if you hit the safe DC, you're good. You lockpick, everything good happens. And if you hit the problematic DC, which should be lower, to where you really give the players a chance to succeed, but then a bad thing happens. I do think that's a pretty good system. I would make it to where if you like really just shit the bed on the roll and failed horribly, then not only is the bad thing, or not only you fail, but like a really bad thing happens. Like you know, you really spring an extra trap that you didn't have there, like the DM didn't have planned ahead of time, or you break your own lockpicks and you have to then repair them or get new ones, or, you know, something. Again, more rules is what I was looking for, though. Pros, sample tables for hidden magical and puzzle doors. This is probably my overall favorite page and piece of content in this supplement. And what I wanted more of for sure, which is give me different kinds of doors that I can throw up onto a dungeon and make them interesting, you know, that aren't just locked doors, in other words. In this case, none of these doors I don't think are traditionally picked by lockpicks, which is why I'm not sure where the actual what kind of skills we're using for these doors. But yes, give me those magic doors that require very specific things to open. Which are basically puzzle doors at that point, the same thing. And then hidden doors, which are also kind of puzzle doors. They're all just kind of different kinds of puzzle doors when you think about it. The other ones are just, the puzzle doors are just riddle doors. That's perfect. That's great. Give me more of those. I think that's good content. Cons, it lacks door-based traps and intricate multi-step door puzzles and tumblers. Just, I was hoping for more interesting advanced door concept. You said just the incredible world of doors and locks, but I didn't see any truly incredible, like, give me some real vault tech shit that's like requires, you know, again, multiple people or one person making multiple checks, turning into a really, you know, satisfying, you know, crescendo of events for the single rogue who gets to really do this stuff, who's a great thief, as well as just give me some great trap examples, because that's obviously one of the easiest repercussions you can do on players when they failing it, and it works for any scenario. Even if there's no other people around or no monsters around, you can just throw a trap at them, and that will be satisfying for the DM, hopefully. And the other con is the repercussion table could result in a lot more narrative work for the DM, which is kind of partly an overlapping complaint with, I think it's overall too narrative focused in general, but specifically this table, because it's supposed to be an important table, which is if the problematic DC happens, here's the problem. And a lot of these are just awkward, like, story-based stuff that would require way more work on the DM's side, and not something I would actually want to employ for that reason. Final verdict: the incredible world of doors and locks offers some nice tables and optional rules, but ultimately falls short of being a definitive supplement for lock picking. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. And you can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons: Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Wizard, Princess, Christopher, Thomas, Captain Mike, Adam, Aiden, Stan, Nathan, Alex, Chad, Alexander, Dan, Cam, and the Quizat, Hatterack. And gold patrons: RPG Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Dead Lizard, Lounge Sam, Arash, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Scalini, Nick, Farney Mick, Butterpants, Bud, Angel, Veronis, Baboon, Nick, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, and James. Thank you all very much for your support.